Welcome to Watch Symposium. I'm Austin. All right, so high-end watches, are they investments or liabilities? Well, all right, first let's just get our terms straight. Now, by investment, I mean you're going to make money, and by liability, long-term, it's going to cost you money. Well, I'd say 99.99% of watches out there are liabilities. Now, some are well, they're not costly liabilities. I'll give you an example. This Seiko I have on right here, this Seiko 5, which I paid 50 bucks for. I'm certainly not going to make any money off of this. Now, I feel like I've gotten my money's worth, and I would buy it again if I had the chance. It's brought me a lot of pleasure. 50 bucks worth for sure. But this watch could turn into a liability. If I got emotionally attached to this watch and something happened to it and I decided to have it serviced, that could cost $300. So that would turn this watch into a liability. And that's one reason why you got to be careful getting attached to a watch like this, because it could cost you money in the future. And who knows, that could be reason to really just avoid watches like this. Now, I like watches like this sometimes. They're kind of nice. But you got to treat this watch for what it is. And if something happens with this watch, bye-bye. It's gone. Okay, I can't spend any more money on it. Okay, I've got my $50 worth of enjoyment, and that's that. All right. So there you go. Now, let me bring up my grandfather's watches. Now, my grandfather's watches, and I'll make some videos about the Timex, which I got back recently. My mom, when she was visiting, brought it from the States, and that's a whole nother video. But you know, those watches, I've spent $300 a piece on his 3 watches. So those are not high-end watches. They're absolutely worthless to everyone in the world but me. And you know, from I guess a monetary point of view, they have been liabilities, but it's okay. They're my grandfather's watches. I'm absolutely thrilled to have them, and I don't mind paying for what they mean to me emotionally. And I think I can be forgiven for that. I think you guys understand and would probably do the same thing. That was a thrilling thing to be into watches and then sort of get these you know, grandfather watches, and getting them running was great. But they were liabilities, and that could be a reason why you want to kind of think about what the ultimate fate of your watches will be once you die. My grandfather was different than you and I. I think perhaps we look at watches as long-term purchases, heirlooms, things you want to pass to your children, things you imagine your children or grandchildren would want, little pieces of you. And in that sense, you want to make sure you give them something worth having. And something like a Rolex, that's a fantastic heirloom. Everybody wants a Rolex. I mean, that's kind of a neat thing about my Rolexes. So this is a side note, but no matter what my fate, those watches will continue in some capacity. They are wanted. And if they're not wanted by my offspring or their offspring, they'll be wanted by someone, and they will be, you know, 20, 30 years down the road, they'll be taken away. Hopefully, if they're taken care of. I mean, I can't imagine they wouldn't be, because they are investments. They are worth it. But something like what my grandfather had, well, nobody really wants those except your grandson. He looked at watches differently. They were just tools to throw away and to use. And in that sense, he really didn't think long-term about it. He looked at watches differently than perhaps you and I do. All right, so 99.999% of watches are liabilities. They're gonna they're gonna not make you any money, and they're gonna cost you money. And again, if you're talking a low-end watch like this, who cares, right? $50 down the drain, that's all right, it's worth it. But if you're talking a several $1,000 watch, you'd probably want to get something that falls into the investment category. What is that? That would be Rolex. Any Rolex? No. Not precious metal Rolex, not two-tone, steel sports Rolex. Now, this is not novel, and I got to credit Archie Luxury with this. He's been saying this for years, and it's damn good advice. And say what you will about Archie, he nailed it, and he should be given credit for that, and that's why he is the pontiff. It's great advice, and it's worked out for me with the pieces that I've gotten, and they have increased in value. But I really got them because I like them, not because I was looking for investments. But it's nice that that the watch that you love also can be viewed as an investment. All right, so steel sports watches. Now, I think the two top ones, as you know, are the sub and the GMT, and particularly the GMT. The GMT is it's gone nuts, and that's the watch to have. And if you're looking for an investment, I don't think you'd be wrong to go GMT. I think you could get a GMT today for whatever they're going for. Well, I think it's about 10 grand, and you wait 2 years, and you may be able to make your money back. Now, I say may be able to make your money back because if you have a GMT today and they're selling for 10, that doesn't mean you can sell it for 10 because you're not a brick and mortar store. A brick and mortar store has more responsibility and better, so people feel more comfortable about it. They're more likely to pay 10,000 there. If you're you and you're selling it on eBay, you're probably not going to get 10,000 for it. When somebody can go to a store and have that kind of the feeling of safety and that reassurance of buying it from a brick and mortar store. But when it goes to 12 or to 14, then you probably could sell it on eBay for 10. All right, so so you got to keep that in mind. Just because they're selling for 10 doesn't mean you can get it for sell it for 10. Another brand, Patek, I think is another investment piece, but I think Rolex is a far better proposition. And why is that? Well, a sub. Okay, you can probably get a sub maybe for 7 now. And there's a lot more people walking around with $7,000 in their pocket than the $30,000 it would take to buy a Patek. Now, I haven't watched Archie in a while, but I'm going to go out on a limb here and make a guess that he still has his World Time. Now, that's a $30,000 watch, and I think he kind of wants to sell it. I would want to sell it. I think instead of having that, I think having 3 steel GMTs would be, investment-wise better. But it's tough to sell a $30,000 watch, because if you're talking $30,000 watch, somebody who has $30,000 probably has the money to buy new at Patek, or, well, there's just not a lot of people with $30,000. There are more people with 7. Okay, so unloading your Rolex is going to be easier. It's more of a market, and so I think that's why I would go Rolex in terms of investments. Now, do I look at my watches like investments? I don't actually. I kind of look at them as liabilities, because that, everything I spend on my watches would be safe if it was in the bank. But my watches could get damaged, lost, stolen. All of a sudden, the investment's gone. It's instantly become a liability. Also, there's service cost, and that's one reason why I really have limited the number of watches that I've gotten, because I look at them as cars that need servicing, and as good as it would be to have 10 Rolexes, that's really going to up your service costs. You know, you're going to have to keep them running, and look, they run for a long time, and if you use them sparingly, it's not going to be a big deal. But I always have to, you know, have one service when I get a pre-owned watch. It's just sort of make sure everything's good and legit. And you know, up until now, I've probably spent north of 2,000 USD on services, and I won't have to have them serviced for a while, but eventually I will. So that would be an aspect of liability. Now, hopefully your watches are going to increase in value enough to keep up with the service cost. And you know, I've done some figures, and putting in service costs, I think I could get out of my watches, even with the service costs factored in the green. But I don't want to do that. I don't really want to do that. So, are they investments to me? I don't think of them as investments, because I don't see making money off of them in the future. I don't want to sell them. So while they could be viewed as investments, I don't really view them as investments at all. Kind of view them as a liability, but yeah, I guess I do at least have the comfort of knowing that they could be an investment if I have to turn them into one, and that would mean selling them. Now, I would look at them as investments after the fact, once they're gone, because you know, if I look at any money I made, then obviously that was an investment, and that's not something you could say about many brands. Now, you know, I don't know if I bitch about Rolex, but I've brought up the fact that they can't seem to keep their models in stock, and they seem to be playing games with you know, demand and so forth. But the reason Rolex is what Rolex is because of the company, and because they don't treat their watches, they don't pimp their watches like, say, Omega does. An Omega Speedmaster, you know, you buy it new, it's not an investment. You buy it pre-owned, it's not an investment. I mean, that's a textbook liability right there, and it's because they just make them and make them and make them. Whereas Rolex, they're out to make a buck, but they're looking more long term, and by not filling demand is increased, and that's good for all of us who have Steel Sports watches. So Steel Sports Rolex watches. So perhaps we should thank Rolex for protecting the brand. If you have one of their watches, they're looking out for themselves, but they're looking out for what you have on your wrist as well, and that could work out for you down the road if you try to sell it. All right, well, there you go. Investments. Rolex Steel Sports watches are investments, and everything else, save some Pateks perhaps, are liabilities, in my opinion. Are there the odd exception, the white Seiko, is that what Forester? What's that watch called? The one with the I can't remember the name of it, but the one with the bezel type thing that works as a compass. What is that called? The hiker? I can't remember what it's called. But anyway, the white one, that would be one exception. And there are exceptions here and there, right? The perhaps the Seiko Snowflake, maybe. But with Rolex, it's not an exception. It's the rule with the Steel Sports pieces. Anyway, I know I'm basically just saying what Archie has said for years, but I thought I'd make a video about that. It might be a good reason to get that Rolex Steel Sports watch now, today. Take care. Thanks for watching. Let me know. Investment, liability. Do you buy that way? Do you think like that in terms of your purchases? I can't say that I do, but I think some people do. And did I miss any? Are there any other investments out there, or is steel sports Rolex the way to go? Thanks for watching. Take care. See you next time.